Good evening. Welcome to Bombay Management Association's Friday Fundamentals. As you all know, every week on Wednesdays and Fridays, we come up with new motivating sessions which help us in making our skills in leadership and management much better. And for so many months, as we started with these webinars, now we have a great repository of great sessions on the Bombay Management Association's YouTube channel. Please have a look at those sessions also and subscribe for the Bombay Management Association's YouTube channel. To add to the flavor, today we have with us Shri Jayshankar ji, who is again going to give us another very interesting topic. And the topic is about the business, succeeding in business, and the family businesses will be his focus. Before I proceed with the introduction, I will welcome once again Shri Jayshankar ji, Professor RSS Mani, the immediate past president, all the participants in this webinar, and my colleagues on executive committee to this very interesting session where we are going to discuss the success and the family businesses. Today we have with us Shri Jayshankar ji, who is an author of a book which is Succeeding in Business, Nurturing Value in Family Business. Shri K. Jayshankar ji is the founder of Empowered Learning, a certified management consultant. He has been a trusted advisor and a coach to family businesses, executing assignment across India and the globe, advising the family businesses. Apart from the private sector companies, and as a coaching official of the United Nations, his assignments have also extended to both the government and the social sector. He has been a faculty member at various business schools, and his articles have featured in many publications in India and overseas. Amongst the other notable achievements, he organized and facilitated India's first corporate leadership expedition, Reach for the Sky, when a group of business executives summited Kilimanjaro on August 15, 2007. Very interesting. Sir, we would like to know about this expedition because it's about leadership and what other than expedition, which is testing your abilities and testing your team spirit. I think that also can be, you can touch upon that also.
Sure.
Sri Jayshankar's primer on family business, Succeeding in Business, Nurturing Value in Family Business, has been well received both by experts and practitioners. And today he is going to talk on the same theme. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and our thanks are due to Professor RSS Mani, our guide and leader for getting new people in the foray of Bombay Management Association. So thank you, Mani sir, and thank you, Jayshankar ji, for accepting our invitation. Over to you for the session.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, namaskar and good evening. And Kavita ji, first of all, thank you for the invitation to join you all for the session. And I think I must, confess that the idea has actually been seeded by Professor Mani, because when we were discussing the book, and he's, as many of you know, he's very, very widely respected, not just in academic circles, but also in business circles, and also, prolific in his work, and also as a prolific reader. So when he heard about the book, he immediately said, why don't we do this for, the audience of BMA, because he mentioned that the BMA, as he mentioned a short while earlier also, likes to provide inputs for its larger family. The BMA family, in this case, is a larger family not just of large corporations, and there are large corporations or members, but also I think a plethora of small and medium businesses who look at BMA not only for inputs, but also for inspiration. So I think from that respect, thanks, Professor, for inviting me to
welcome, Jay.
Participate in the session. So with those words, let me just begin the discussions, and let me just say that it is all about this book, and I'll tell you more about this book, which many of you are aware. But what I really said, and I was sharing with Kavita, that what I want to do is not really talk about the book presents typically, as good books do, talk about all the good practices and good things to do, etc. But to help you understand some of these ideas, dark and light and shade, or darkness and brightness, I said let me focus on the darker side, and then thereby show you some of the brighter side of how things are done. So I have actually I focused on what I call the blind spots that families unfortunately fall under, or they suffer from, and which makes them ineffective. And I've tried to put this together into a baker's dozen. Therefore, these ideas are explored, and I will share examples about some of them. And I will also, what I will do also is tell you what the book talks about, so that some of the brighter, for those of you who wish to understand it a little deeper, you can always refer to the book, because my intention is that the book talks about good things to do, so that businesses can be sustained over multiple generations. So my focus there, that's what I intend to do. And let me begin with, this is what I intend to do. My explorations will range around these things. Obviously, there will be lots of questions, and I'm looking forward to those questions. And I'll welcome those questions at the end of the discussions. So first things first. Why this subject? Because that's what people often ask me, why did you pick up this subject amongst the various things that one can talk about? And I want to confess right at the outset that I'm fascinated by businessmen. And many of you may know these two youngsters who hit the headlines about a month ago. And for those of you who may be wondering who these young faces are, here are the names: Adit Palicha and Kavita Laghate. 19-year-old students from Stanford who've taken a break from Stanford and have started a business, which some of you may be aware of. They're called these now, like you have these cloud kitchens, they are now talking of these dark stores, things from where you can get your groceries in 15 minutes, 10 minutes. You have Swiggy's model called the Instamart. These two youngsters are entrepreneurs and who have created a company, and they've attracted a lot of VC funding. The company is called Zepto, as you can make out from the t-shirt. And for me, entrepreneurs are fascinating. Unfortunately, we don't respect them enough in our country. That's a little bit of a concern that I always talk about, Young entrepreneurs in today's generation, we see lots of them coming in through, into the limelight. But perhaps when, Mani and I were much younger, they were always entrepreneurs. Not everybody was so, fated in that sense, But today the world has changed. And some of these youngsters are tomorrow's leaders who will create family businesses. So, and when you talk of family businesses that are running in India today, well, many of them started off in this fashion. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, or maybe 70, 80 years ago, some 100 years ago, and more, there were some people who started a business, So I think, and my book, in a sense, is a tribute to the entrepreneurial gene. Not really a gene, of course. Anybody with a strong drive can actually become an entrepreneur. But it's a tribute to the fact that they create a business. But the question is, what happens after they build a business? How do you nurture it to the next generation? That's what I think we need to focus about. So very quickly, when you look at any business, any entrepreneur, or any family business in particular, and this is not just for family business, but for all businesses, they love to play to win. Their entire focus is that there is a great or a deep desire to win, And there is enough data that shows that while we said family businesses are not very respected in some ways in some quarters of India, thankfully it is changing. But truly, when you look around us, they contribute 66% of the GDP. and they employ nearly 80% of the workforce. We all focus on multinationals, we talk about professionally run firms, but a lot of family businesses are the ones that are actually providing the, shall I say, the strength to the economy. But for these people who are vulnerable, much more than money is at stake. Reputations are easily destroyed, credibility can be, hurt. So they have to play to win, because for them, only when they do that, they can create future leverage, and perhaps their own existence comes under question. And yeah, while I've said that there is no one to bail them out, in the past, yes, Indian family businesses have been bailed out by the government. But as you know, since 1990, and let's say even later, over the last 15 years, 20 years, bailing out family businesses is no longer the government's job. So truly, if they wish to survive, they have to have the drive of making it happen. So therefore, they are compelled to be resilient. And last year, COVID has actually hit many of them. As I'm sure some of you are aware, but a number just hit me when it came out 2 weeks. There was an article, I think, in one of the newspapers, and I think I remember reading it in Scroll. There are about 11,000 small and medium businessmen have committed suicide in the last 18 years, 18 to 24 months. Farmer suicides, while deplorable, they hit the headlines. But when small-scale businessmen or medium businessmen commit suicide, one well-known businessman who committed suicide about 2 years ago, that hit the headlines. You know who I'm referring to, the gentleman from Bangalore. But there are anonymous 11,000 others who are forgotten. So for these people, and some of them are small businessmen, perhaps nothing but bigger than just tradesmen. These are people who are entrepreneurs. These are people who've got small family businesses. And for them, if they don't succeed, they cannot actually perhaps even survive. But when I was discussing this book with various families, and the idea behind the book came up because I heard one of them tell me, that, look, we have no choice but to succeed. And come what may, we are not going to go away. We will be there. And truly, I respect the spirit of the desire to win, and they play to win. What, of course, as I will tell you shortly, is that not all of them do it in the right fashion, which is why I call it a blind spot. But if they truly do it correctly, then there is a scope for great victories on their, from their side. And this is not just national data, international data. And some of you may be aware of a major research study done by some professors in the University of Virginia, where they had compared, and this is I've taken from my colleague, Professor John Davis, the professor at Harvard and now at MIT, who done a lot of research to show that family businesses survive for a much longer period and they actually generate greater results. So the value they create is sustained far longer if and when they actually move into the second and third generations. And of course, there are businesses that have gone to many more generations. So with that background in mind, let's plunge into the subject. And there are new family businesses constantly in the news, constantly rising. Well, this, of course, is a historic story. And I thought I must remind you about the fact that this is a family which is not a very old business. And this is a beautiful combination of a new age methodology and some traditional businesses. This is not a technology kind of business or a software kind of business. This is selling personal products, but of course, using or leveraging the modern methods. But what I love about the story is that you all know that the family business started by the well-known lady, Falguni, India's latest billionaire, if I can call her that, started the business when she was 50 years old. So for those of you who are in the discussions today and who are participating in our webinar, there's still scope for you to start if you have not started yet. Okay, and this is 50 is also not too, and there are people who have started even at a later rate. But look at the fact that they have generated something which I hope gets passed on to the next generations. This photograph, of course, was at the ringing of the bell, and you know that the business is manned, there are two strong verticals manned by the daughter and the son. Okay, so Anchit and Advait, and of course Sanjay, the husband, is the gentleman behind the scene, more or less, because of course he is himself a very, very well respected professional manager and a VC in today's time. So a new family business rises, and for India to succeed, I think we need to see many more family businesses rise. So I'm fascinated by this recent political campaign from the Delhi government. And I don't want to be political about these conversations, but I'm fascinated by the fact that they are running a campaign telling a child that Delhi government wants to create more employers rather than employees. It's only that aspect of the ad that I want to focus on. And of course, it's not only that government. There are many governments, including the one at the center, which has been telling people, don't look for jobs, become employers yourself. In other words, if I said 66% of the GDP comes from family business, there is a lot of scope to take it to 70, 80%, which is what is also there in many other well-established Western economies. But while some new businesses rise, there are many that remain troubled. You guys know this. I don't have to elaborate too much. All these this is all, spice that the newspapers pick up. And of course, some of them stumble so hard that they run far away. But these are all family businesses who have destroyed value. Okay. Not that there is no value being created, but do not understand the word value only in terms of monetary value. There is reputational value. There is value that gives them leverage and many other dimensions. Some of these people have stumbled and fallen, And I thought I'll share this with you because one of the things that the pandemic has done is that it has also turned many of these people into authors. So when people often ask me about my book and they said, when was it written? I said, this book took me 20 years to write because for 20 years I was on the road. But last year I got the time to sit down and pour all those ideas into a book. But it is not only me. There's this gentleman who's also written a book called The Incomplete Life. Some of you will tell you it's a bestseller. And also, of course, Siddharth has also written a book. Okay, so authors everywhere. Some with sob stories, some with success stories. And of course, talking of authors, here's a story which is absolutely fascinating because I think it in some ways signifies this transformation of business that I'm talking about, which is how value can be nurtured from one generation to the next in new forms. And you all know the story of Mr. Mariwala, of course, isn't it? And his two children who have decided that they will not run the business, but they will certainly continue to own it. Okay, and that will happen. And talking of authors, well, Mr. Mariwala's book has also done wonders, isn't it? Okay, another bestseller. So there is a big story behind the subject of family business, and there are many people who have studied it. So I'm going to give you my take on it. And as I give you my take, let me begin by saying the 13 blind spots is what I will focus on. The first one, number one, is that ignoring the family, when families ignore that there are business principles. Kavita ji, of course, is a well-known, business professor. We have Professor Mani, who has done tons of, created tons of students. They will tell you that a family that forgets business principles are, in a sense, doomed to fail. So I often talk about this, saying that families and businesses are two sides of the same coin. So they're Janus-faced. There are two sides, and unfortunately, businesses don't remember this because they put sometimes families ahead, sometimes businesses ahead. But the moment you forget what you're there for, there is going to be confusion. So no business is immune from certain essential principles of business. Certainly not family business. And therefore, to me, the story of nurturing value, and the book has created, I use the analogy of a butterfly. And this big, beautiful butterfly, which all of us admire, nature's, marvels. But when I use the model of a butterfly and I use that as an analogy of business, we all have learned it in our school that essentially there are 4 big stages of a butterfly's life. It's likewise, when you look at businesses, when you map a business to this perspective, I ask often businesses saying, tell me which stage is your business in? And it's not so difficult. The first generation is usually in the stage 1. Then as they progress, they move from stage to stage. And as you know, businesses have to move through these stages. Not all businesses obviously will go through all four stages, just like not all, caterpillars end up as butterflies. But the caterpillar stage is the stage which I call the stage, as I've used in the book, I would say that the caterpillar stage is the stage where the business is consuming capital. If you have ever seen a caterpillar exist, they live to eat. And that is, to me, the stage where a business is funding, making investments. At the time of investments, businessmen often wonder, will this ever give me a return? But it's an article of faith. It's a risk that they take. But if they do, and they have done it very well, the value will emerge, the butterfly will emerge. But you know what? The desire is to make this big, beautiful butterfly. This morning, I met a family business. I met the third generation member who's just come back from the United States after his studies, and he's going to inherit the business. And the two sons, in this case, there are two sons. I met the elder son, and they are bringing in professionals as they go big, because their desire is very simple. It's a big business. Now they intend to take it even bigger, because when you look around India, they see tons of opportunities. So a new cycle is going to start in that family business. And to me, it's all about our discussion centered around creating change. Now, in nature, if the caterpillar survives, one day it will become a butterfly. In business, there are no guarantees. You have to design that success. If you cannot design the success, you will never have the butterfly. Well, sometimes you're lucky and you can get some lucky breaks. Okay. But then if you don't, if you desire to sustain it, then you will have to invest in making it happen. So the need to clarify where you are headed, and all that is, of course, in the realm of business principles, which I don't intend to go into at this in this session today. But never forget that. Business who forget that, ask for trouble. Let's look at the second blind spot. And the second blind spot is the fact that sometimes bigger businesses, family businesses, there are too many people trying to run things. And क्या करें? Family member है, उसको कुछ role देना पड़ता है ना? That seems to be the conversation that we often end up having. No? So there are, I call it, many hands at the steering wheel. Therefore, the navigation becomes poor. And perhaps there are too many people stepping on the brake. So the business is bound to go off rail. And there is bound to be trouble. So in other words, while you're running a business, you better be clear, like in any organization, you better be clear how the business is being run. Because the business is run on multiple rounds. It's like a game. These youngsters play on video games, and when you die, you get a second chance or third chance, till, of course, you flame out totally. To me, a business is all about, being ready to understanding this principle, saying that you have to keep moving. A business that does not grow has begun to die. In family businesses in particular, because when one or two people are taking all the calls, if they pause, decisions are not taken, critical decisions are not taken, and then business is bound to flounder. Because never forget that the secret of constant growth is very simple. We all have two jobs, whether you work in a multinational firm or a family business or any kind of business, any organization for that matter, not just a business. And my friends from the world of academics will also tell you, the first curve is all about managing or servicing today's organization. And the bigger responsibility is to sustain by creating tomorrow's organization, by investing in today. So we all have two roles to play. We run today's world business and simultaneously create the future. And that simultaneity is what causes difficulties, because business is not an easy thing to do. It's not just business, actually, all organizations. There are two jobs that all of us have. And in family businesses, because often decisions are taken, like I said, there is lack of clarity as to who takes those calls. All the guys in the business are leaving it to one or two people to make decisions. Or the hands and legs are not in coordination, and therefore you're going to ask for trouble. And when that happens, well, serious issues come. Because as the business grows, you go outside the family, and then, of course, you bring in professionals. But anybody who has worked in organizations will tell you that unless there is clarity on the role of those professionals, and if you don't bring in professionals correctly, you're running into trouble. Mr. Mariwala's book, wonderful tale that is. As you know, he has transitioned the business into professional hands. The family owns it, they don't run it. But they have chosen people with the right fit. The trouble with a lot of family businesses is they go and hire professionals. Some of them are now in today's world, know they have to pay well. They might even pay well, but they have forgotten the cultural fit. So the third point here, select the senior professional with care to ensure cultural fit. So, and also when I talk to professionals who want to join family business, I also tell them, look, you need to be resilient. Don't think what you did in your earlier multinational job is now going to be easy for you to do in a family business. This is a different ecosystem. So the family needs to be ready to transition to professional hands, but the professional must also understand that the fit has to will only happen properly. And this is often not done correct. So the inadequate or improper transition. They assume that when you pick up qualified people from Bajaj Institute or any other best institutes from the ITM professionals, you're not looking at the personality and therefore you're asking for trouble. And that trouble is going to be something which is going to hurt you very badly, because some of them walk out and then you blame professionals, or the professionals blame the family. There was never ever a proper fit. Both sides were not ready for each other. Okay, so they fall in love in the interview, but they fall out of love very fast. Signs of today's society, you might say, but that's what happens. But what accelerates the process of not fitting is the fact that inside the family, like I said, many hands in the steering wheel, many foot on the brake, there's always something happening, So ignoring those issues that are happening and not creating the setup, and this is important, you need to create structures that help you to resolve conflicts, because conflicts are bound to happen. It is inevitable. And one of those issues of conflict is, of course, money, isn't it? Money will come into the business. Initially, you struggle for it. When you create the business, particularly as it goes into multiple generations, then, of course, unfortunately, the patriarchs, and more often than not in Indian society or even global, it's often the patriarch more than the matriarch, So unfair divisions. I call it unfair because guess what? I told you the story of the business that stumbled. This gentleman. And those of you who know the story very well may recognize this young face in the, to the right in your picture. All know that, of course, Vijaypad Singhania was not just a well-known industrialist, he was also an adventurer. And one of those adventures that we all, of course, used to track that when he was flying across Europe, and on his microlight aircraft. And some of you may have read this book called An Angel in the Cockpit, which he wrote after his flight. And if you notice this picture a little more carefully, there is a small photograph on the right-hand bottom of the cockpit. And that was what Vijaypad Singhania said was the angel that helped him fly across the oceans. Well, the picture to the left is the same angel many decades later. As some of you know this family story, you often talk about the current discussions and the public news about Vijaypad Singhania and his son Gautam, who's transforming the business, as many of you are aware. But also Vijaypad Singhania's elder son and his children ran into trouble. And of course, those of you who have studied family businesses or are aware, a lot of legalities were involved. That angel is this young lady who many years later, many decades later, she and her siblings said, what about our share of the business? What about our share of the wealth? So what we don't, it doesn't matter what our parents have done. So I bring this up saying, you think you're being fair, but guess what? Maybe the courts will side with you. But if you have not taken into account all these principles, you are forgetting that it'll come back to bite you. So when the moment you create a business, let's not forget that. There's a whole model which talks about the fact that when a business becomes large, when it's no longer, you and your immediate family and you bring in others, there are multiple stakeholders involved. And when there are multiple stakeholders, there are many voices that are trying to tell you how to run the business. And I think if you forget that and you start thinking that, no, it's only you who will take those final calls, you're asking for some very serious trouble. That's a huge blind spot. And that will generate a lot of intergenerational clash of values. And this is not by the values by here, I'm referring to ethical issues. Cynically, some people say that if you look back at the history of all businesses, you'll find some robber baron. But we are living in today's world where we like to talk about mission, vision, values. We write about it, we create it. But deep down, something may have happened. So when things explode, a lot of skeletons from the cupboard come out. So you need to ask yourself, if you're someone running a business, what are the messages that you have been giving your family members in the right from day one? And if you have not groomed your children in the right fashion, or if you have not, and you have not modified your own behavior as you go along, you're sooner or later, sowing seeds for trouble for the future. And you are all aware that those conflicts that I referred to can take very, very ugly forms. And in my book, I have given lots of examples of a conflict that became extremely ugly, leading to physical battles, physical fistfights. I mean, not just legal and the code of law. So when that happens also, there's a lot of trouble which is waiting to win. There will be so much of, and that will destroy the good work that has been done over the years. And when that is destroyed, you know that the consequences, not just on your family, but also on many other people. There are consequences felt by employees. There are consequences faced by suppliers. There are consequences of other investors who have taken, who put money and faith in your business. Look at the way you're running your business very carefully. Because if you don't do that, you will not be able to generate sustainable value in the business. And one of the biggest blind spots is, of course, succession. And succession planning is actually the source of most of discord. And larger the family, greater the potential issues that are lurking in the background. And I'm not really referring to the fact that you're bringing in your favorite child, usually the son, unfortunately. And now, as you know, there are very, very competent, female members of the family who are also staking their claim. And the good news is that a lot of today's community start changing their outlook towards the role of the female member of the family. But if you do not do this very well, there is bound to be trouble. And this has actually happened in many, many large families. And sometimes, like a dormant gene, the trouble will erupt after one generation. So if you've not planned the succession, and in today's world with businesses getting more complex, the succession, by succession, I'm not talking about anointing a successor. And in the book, I've laid out various methods and steps that could be taken so that you can identify and then groom successors. And those steps are extremely important, because the planning is more important than just the anointing a successor. And if that is not done extremely well, we are actually asking for serious trouble. And this is the aspect that I talk in terms of when I use the word planning. I often like to quote those famous words of General Eisenhower, who later became president. It's very easy to bring in professionals. It's very easy to bring in many members of the family and then say we have a plan. But as I was mentioning a while earlier, it's the planning that is more important than the document that you have created. So too many times in our conversation with businesses, we have heard them tell us very clearly that saying, no, we have a plan, we have hired consultants to give us plans. They think they can outsource the entire process, Well, a document can be created by consultants. A document can be given top down because one or two members of the family have decided. But if you have not involved others in the process, the planning process, the system is bound to be so weak that at the earliest pressure point, which is applied because of external forces or some internal forces, the whole, the organization will collapse. Because even if you have created a constitution, in recent times, thanks to the plethora of family business courses that are being held, thanks to the fact that many businessmen today take it, as a given that they send their children, boys and girls, into, shall I say, BBA programs. I saw a hand raised, Archana. I have made a note. Do you want to make an interjection now, or would you like to hold your question till the end? I promise to take up your question. Okay, Archana, I made a note. I will come back to you.
We will take the question little later.
Okay, done.
Okay.
I saw her, the hand raised, and Archana, I made a note. And as Kavita suggested, we will come back to you and we'll begin. The first question will be yours, since you raised your hand. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So the seeds of success. So thanks to the fact that there are tons of BBA programs, family business programs, lots of now, particularly from tier 2 towns. The large families are sending their children for, to the best of universities overseas to study. But there are many others who are now aspiring, with India opening out. Like I said, there are many more opportunities for family business, and there is a lot of interest of these people to get into courses. So they join a family business course. There are tons of executive education programs that come up, where they're often told, and we often teach them, saying, look, a constitution is useful, having a family council, discuss this, discuss that. And we've often, as consultants, we often get assignments saying, can you help us draw out a constitution? And usually the question that is often asked, 2 questions. First, how much time will it take, and how much will it cost? Standard questions. It's easy to get 3 quotations, right? The vendor mentality. And I have to keep reminding them, look, it's not the document that is important. It's the conversations in the family. The discussions have to, because unless so it could take time. Let me rephrase it. It will take time. Because pasting a constitution from somewhere, somebody or some other family, and then claiming that we also have a constitution, we have laid down rules and regulations, is a huge mistake. You need to iterate. Once it's done, twice it's done, finally you have a document that is ready. Keep it as a cooling period. Because what you genuinely want is people who have bought the whole idea of why you're doing stuff, so that there is no post-purchase regret. And certainly you don't want a situation where the first generation or the founder has rammed through a constitution. And we have seen youngsters who have gone and spoken. Today, families today have very different. It's once upon a time, the old man took his calls and then everybody fell in line. Today, no, youngsters won't do that. And they may not pull out of the family because there's too much of wealth at stake, but they stay within and the trouble is simmering. And invariably, the document that they've all have, nodded their heads and said, okay, when we talk to them individually, they'll tell you there are tons of issues that they have, but they don't talk about it, and which is why the neglected dimension in most families is the communication. Communication between, let's say, the generation 1 and generation 2. Often generation 1 is very comfortable with generation 3. And when the business has grown and there are cousins, so it becomes a cousins consortium. The cousins speak. They sometimes get together and want to talk about what can be sorted out with the earlier generations. Mr. Mariwala's story, and he's very, very open about the fact that he got together with his own cousins and they had to convince the generation before them, saying the future cannot be an extension of the past. Now, that is not an easy conversation. But unless you do that, so the planning process is, to me, more important than the document that you create. Of course, we want a document as well, because without that, we're asking for a lot of trouble. And this is why the biggest mistakes that organizations, family businesses make is they think the things can be solved logically. Emotions, as I said, it can be pushed down, but it cannot be wished away. And the emotional relationships get bundled in multiple ways. Now, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but you'd be amazed at what happens when there are emotional issues, because emotions on all sides. Huh? I'm not saying that the younger generation is right or the older generation is wrong, because many in the older generations, regret the fact that they didn't invest time in building family ties as strong as their business ties. And therefore, those issues become a problem in the future. So, will that be, will you spend time doing it? And how do you do that? And you may have been espousing the right stuff, because when you often create a document, a family constitution talks about family values and they write it out. But then the questions often come up saying, dad or granddad or uncle, you never operated by this. In fact, you still don't operate by these principles. But for the sake of a document, we have created it. Who's going to talk about these kind of issues? So there are a lot of multiple, like I said, multiple also perhaps doesn't fully show how intricate the conversation is. When you talk of family businesses sometimes getting legally, intricate, they're structured in intricate fashions, more than perhaps just the legal intricacies, which can be, sort of opened up with some effort. The emotional baggage is often much more difficult to open up without due investment in time for those kind of conversations. And if that is not done, you're going to be asking for trouble. Moving forward, external assistance. Now, the external assistance comes in multiple ways. External assistance comes because first of all, the resistance to external assistance is not very difficult to understand, particularly in the first generation. When the family has done it by themselves, they always want to keep a tight lip over involving any outsider, particularly where issues of money are involved or technology is involved. They don't trust others very easily. But if you wish to scale, you need experts. And then you have to make that investment in those experts. And so likewise, if you wish to grow your business, instead of blaming consultants, you need to ask yourself, do you know how to use the consultants very well? And also when you bring in consultants, and consultants are also plenty in the market, you sometimes need someone who can help you choose the right consultants. So investing in a trusted advisor, and that, if I use the word investing in a trusted advisor, what I'm really saying is that a long relationship with someone with whom you can have very, very open conversations. It's to Mr. Mariwala's credit that he's very, very open about the fact that he's worked with Mr. Ramcharan, the legendary Ramcharan, for 25 odd years. And not too many people, in my work, I can tell you a lot of very senior professional, quote unquote, professional businessmen also don't want to tell the world that they have a coach. And that's a pity, because the image that they wish to show outside is that, look, we have all the answers. And so it takes great humility to acknowledge that, no, I don't have all the answers, and I will seek help. And I'll seek help from not just from the legal guy, the tax guy, the people who come with specialized skills, but someone who understands the nature of families and how families operate and how family businesses operate. And I often tell people that what you need is someone in your corner. Kavita, looking at me, I don't look like a boxer, but many, many years ago, I used to box in college. And I pick a phrase from boxing. You and I were talking cricket before we started, but in boxing, we use a phrase that you have someone in your corner. You have a trainer or your coach, but you even have seconds who help you train to fight in the ring. So what you need to have someone in your corner, someone who will be with you through thick and thin, someone who works with you and becomes a trusted advisor. Because when you have these open conversations, very honestly, you need to be receptive to the kind of input that they give you, because the trusted advisor has to be a very self-assured, independent professional. Self-assured, because he's not worried saying that I'm going to be asked to go because someone is paying me. So we are professionals, we are paid, but at the same time, we speak our mind. But we also do it in a gentle enough fashion for us to send the message home. But also we know that there are sensitivities that we as human beings have. But you're not afraid. So there is in the book, I've quoted the work of Dr. Jagdish Sheth and Andrew Sobel, where they talk in terms of the qualities of trusted advisors. And this emotional and financial and intellectual independence that you need to have is extremely important. And so, but from a family perspective, if you don't go to the right people for help, you will always blame the world outside for your lack of perpetuity because you've not invested in doing that. When I spoke about my butterfly analogy, I always like to stress to people that in a family business, it's about multiple rounds of the game. You start small, as this family told me this morning when I met them, saying, my father started this business in a small shed, smaller than this room. That is the way they described it. And this company that I met is a company today which is over 5,000 crores. But he's with great pride and humility said, my father started it in a small room, But today when they have grown, they have invested in multiple ways. They've invested by sending the children for higher education. But it's not just the higher degree, degrees that matter, but if you've not taught them the right stuff. In the book, I've referred to an example where there was a family, a very senior family business person who once told me that I'm very worried that I'm telling, and he's got a huge business, multinational business. And he says, I tell my professional managers saying, don't sit in the corporate office in Bombay, go spend time in the field. He said, I learned it that way. He says, today, many of them they refuse to understand the value of doing it. And this gentleman has a business which is involved in rural India, So he says, I want my professional managers to understand that, look, our customers are over there. And if you don't nurture those customers in the right fashion, not just because we are giving them a great product and we are offering discounts and competing hard and lovely presentations and lovely technology, but he says unless we get that personal connect with the rural India, my people will forget what this business is all about. So where do you bring that connect from? He may give lectures one after the other, and he says that, but he needs professionals who can help send that message to his own people. So self-medication is wonderful. We all love that. Okay. But I know COVID period, a lot of us have self-medicated and we say we know the answers, but I rather trust the scientists who tell me take the vaccine, I rather go with people for the right advice. And I think in business, if you don't go to the right people for the right advice, we're asking for, we may not have trouble today, but we're asking for deep trouble later. Hence, you need to create structures of various kinds. And these structures are not forever because many people, when you talk to businesses, they say, look, we have done this, but is it relevant to the world that you are living in? And the term VUCA world is so easily, everybody can tell you what it's, how to spell it, but living through that turbulence is not very easy, And therefore, are you therefore ready to look at all your structures and change it wherever required? And even if you created family structures, even they need to be reviewed. I am not someone who will say that don't change the constitution, but give it time, see how it works. And if there are generational changes, if you need to take a second look, build that into the constitution process and modify it if required. Because review mechanisms are necessary in every process that you create. The last few points before we open up for questions, and I'm really looking forward to the questions. I call this the unvoiced questions. One of the biggest one, there are a number of them. One of the biggest is, is family business about merit or is all about nepotism? Now, you and I know that the world's biggest family business is politics. And that's where often the question comes up, is it merit or nepotism, And I don't mean any party, or I don't mean in India, I mean around the world. And I'm not even referring to monarchies, I'm also referring to democracies. Because generationally people get into business. And it's not strange, it's not, and there's nothing wrong with it. But when you want to sustain and create for the future, you have to ask yourself. And the accusation, I told you in India, businessmen have not been respected in the past. And part of the reason is where we always end up assuming that whatever the businessman is doing is only for himself and not for the nation. And I dispute that. Businessmen seek opportunities. And after they seek opportunities, they do their best to make that opportunity worthwhile. Because like I said, there is a huge drive to win because they may collapse. And when they collapse, there is no one to pick them up. So naturally, when they do that, they're looking in the environment and seeking business opportunities. But those business opportunities build the nation. If today we are so proud of the fact, and I worked for the Tata Group many years ago, I can tell you, we take a lot of pride in the fact that we are all what we call Tata ke log, men from Tata. But I also admire the fact that, look, they saw opportunities in an environment when there was British colonial India. And they invested their capital, which today is paid off in education, in commerce, in science, in every other field. So family is important. But don't think that all the family business is against the nation. I think that's completely wrong. But inside the family, when you're allocating roles, please ensure that you bring in the right people. Otherwise, splits will happen. And splits per se are not an issue. Where there are multi-generational business, family members who want to be in the business, new ventures will exist, But if you wish to take it to a different level, or depending on the way your family sees the business, one of the options before them is to ask, can we move from running the business to being owners of the business and investors in the business, and let others, professionals, run it and generate value for themselves as well as for the family. And the last question there, on one of the questions I've examined, is a whole chapter on is business forever. And I don't think business is forever, because in our country we have looked down on businessmen who have sort of divested. 2 weeks ago, I think, was it 2.5 weeks ago, there was a story of one more large businessman from Delhi who decided to sell large part of his stake to a Japanese company in the engineering industry. Yeah, somebody's speaking. But I think it's not a problem if you want to divest and move away. There are very good examples of people who moved away. I'd rather that you move away than hang on to it and destroy whatever is there, because you have got into it, and then you feel the weight of gravity and you want to, you get dragged down by it. And if your business has lost its purpose, it's time to revisit and ask yourself completely, saying, why are we in this? Why are we doing this? Move on if required. Or take a break, take a very good look at your business and change the nature of the way you are doing your business. Bring in others who can run it better for you, and share the not just the burden of running the business, but also the excitement of running the business with many more people. Figure out a way of doing it. But if you intend to close the business and move on, I have no issue with that. Because yeah, the cycle can come to an end. But the key question that comes up is, when will you do this? Will it take a crisis for you to wake up? Or do you want to do it by design? And if you want to do it by design, then welcome the questions that some members in the family have been saying in the corridors, telling the mother to ask the father, telling consultants saying, go and ask my dad. Because trouble is just waiting to surface. Why not take the right call, Because the reality of every business, I said in the beginning, principles of business don't change. There is pain involved. Bite it now or face it later. Because as professionals, we all have learned years ago what this wise old man had said. I call him the philosopher of management, right, Kavita? We all know who this man is. And he said this: courageous decisions. It takes courage to take. So, Kavita, the point you had asked me was, tell me about Kilimanjaro. And let me share with you my personal philosophy. I believe that all business is about risk. And to me, risk is not an Excel sheet. All risk is personal. It's inside you. The founder of a business has started, most businesses have started without having all the capital. Because deep down there was a voice that said, we'll figure it out. And therefore they have started the journey. So courageous decisions are required. So for me also, when I talk to, whether it's professional managers or family businesses, I always tell them, don't look for the ultimate right answers. Do a lot of thinking, but be ready to take a step, saying that the right answers will emerge. No, it's not a gamble. It's about doing your homework, having lots of discussions, consultations. But it's not a rational process alone. Emotions are involved, And if you can do that, then you can succeed in business. Then you can take the value that you have generated in the business from one generation to the next, and you can move on to the forward. And I did get Kavita's permissions to say that, look, if you're interested in knowing more about it, you're welcome to read the book. And while it's available on Amazon and Flipkart, etc., but if you go to my publisher and use the coupon code BMA special, you'll get your extra discount. And I wish you success in whatever business enterprise that you're in or you wish to start. Because as I was mentioning, it's never too late to get started. But when you start something, remember, it cannot be something that occupies you half the time. It is something that you will have to nurture as much as you have done everything and anything else in life. So you have to take a lot of effort, take courageous calls, and nurture the business so that it can actually go forward. So thank you very much for giving me the time to share my thoughts. But what I'm really looking forward to, Kavita, is I would love to hear from our audience who have questions. And while I cannot promise answers for everything, I certainly want to hear the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayshankar ji. It was really very nice that 13 points that you have called them as blind spots, which are challenges for the family businesses. I'm sure all our participants today have questions, and I will request them to raise their hands so that we can ask them to unmute themselves. But before that, I want to ask you, any family business, the process of becoming professionally managed business and a family business, what do you think? How much time do they take? Or there will not be a single correct answer, but then what is your experience that how people try and become a professionally managed family business?
Well, you said it. There is no one answer. It really depends on the circumstances of the families. But let me give you two examples. Let's talk about a small businessman, the ultimate, micro businessman, the first generation guy. I mean, let's put it this way. There are lots of business communities in India who have started a business as traders. Okay. And the 40s and 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, this trading family came from, let's say, Kutch and came to Mumbai, set up a store, started their operations. What they have always done is they looked ahead to the future and said, I want to educate my children. And they educate the child. Best of education in India. The son, usually, and in those days, it was usually the son. Fortunately, it's changing, as I said. They get into the business. And at a very early age, they get into the business. But it's still within the family. But as the son, because of his education and his own aspirations, begins to grow the business, and then he brings on people to work with him. But at this stage, they're still not professional in that sense. But comes a stage where there is one more generation waiting to join. At that point of time, I've seen instances, and I'm giving you a specific example, where the father and the two sons sat down and said, how do we take this to the next level? And then unfortunately, professionalism often means we will go and get highly qualified people. Okay. So it has taken a long journey, but that journey started with let's say the second generation deciding that I want to grow the business, because instead of remaining one shop, one store, they have decided to take it to multiple locations, and they went into manufacturing. From trading, they've discovered areas where they can manufacture and go, either up the value stream or even down the value stream, depending on the line of business. But the professionals come in that sense a little later. Now, I would dispute the fact that earlier there were no, while I said that he brought in other people, that's in a normal sense, we would say they are not professionals, but some of them are technically proficient. And some of those guys grow into higher ranking in the organization. So the quote unquote professionalization of the business began at that time, but it took a much more active and bigger shape much later. So even if you look at very large industrial houses in India, there was a generation in the 60s and 70s that started bringing in good people, and then they grew it in the firm, But it took the 80s and the 90s to bring in many more highly educated people from various levels. And because the scale went up, that's when some of those family businesses, in a sense, turned professional. And as the business grew further, the family members receded to the background and others have run. Sometimes circumstances have happened that some of them have accelerated the process. So that even if they have the one or two members of the family are, let's say, they're still the chairman or the MD, they have in certain verticals created, business unit heads. So they have brought in professionals there. But at the highest level, it's still a family-run business, but they've brought in other professionals to run. The next stage for them will be when actually some of these people, and I did mention, since I'm still talking about the Singhanias, you may have seen stories about the Wadias and the Singhanias who have not decided completely that they want to step back and remain as owners. Gautam Singhania in this case, and the recent story about the Wadia sons having decided that they will step back and let the professionals run. These are all examples of people, 100 years plus businesses, who are now saying we will move to the next generation where we will remain as owners, but we will not manage it. So that has taken many years. But the seed of the idea was there, I think, many years ago. In a small business, it can happen faster. In big businesses, it often takes a little longer, but it's happening.
Sure.
Shall we allow Archana to ask, because I did promise her that
Archana and Devangji also had raised his hand. So
okay.
I'll request Archana to unmute herself, and then Devangji.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, please. Devangji, आप पूछने वाले हैं कि is it going to be Archana first?
I am unable to see Archana, so Devangji, please go ahead.
Very good afternoon, very good evening to the team. Wonderful session, Mr. Jai. My name is Devang. I am heading the Center for Family Business at Marwadi University, Rajkot.
Okay.
And if you are aware, the Saurashtra region has been an epitome of family-run businesses, and the university which I represent, from 10,000 students, around 3,500 students come from the family business background.
Of course.
I'm creating a context for you where my mandate is to help them kind of be family business ready. Now, what does that mean is I have been told by the vice chancellor and the promoters not to do any teaching training. So there are no programs, because they feel, and I also strongly feel, that MBA family business actually doesn't make a family business person a family business professional.
Yeah.
I don't know, too less a time, but from your experience, the question therefore is, how do professionals like you who are engaged into coaching, consulting, family businesses help young minds at a college level to be family business ready? That's the question. Thank you.
Well, I think, Devang, you said you're already doing it. So therefore, I think the first thing is they are lucky to have good faculty, The sad part about India is that we have lots of university students craving good faculty. And unfortunately, the good faculty has often been only in large urban centers, But the good news is that whether it's the medium which we are using today, virtual medium, or for others like you who are actually traveling and maybe providing inputs. I think that opportunity is the first thing to basically allow young minds to understand that there are more models than the ones that they have seen in their life. Okay, I think that's very, very important. Opening their minds to multiple alternatives. It's not our job to thrust any alternative on them, but offering them choice is what we need to do. And that choice is by giving them multiple models and guiding them to choose the right things. But taking the final call is entirely up to them, but providing them options. And as you know, business is not an MBA exercise. It's really about being immersed in it. So immersing them, and if your program is allowing students to get immersed, not just in their family business, but in other businesses, through whether it's through internship, through training, etc., that gives them a great chance to observe. But beyond the observation is the chance to work with faculty like all of you, so that they can reflect on it with guidance, so that the right lessons are learned. But because it's not just about observation, it's about helping them draw the best lessons from what they have observed. And I think that is where often conversion from observation to insight needs the support of good coaches like you are. I'm sure Devang, you're one of them. So I think that's the process. What the process and systems are required, I think that's a separate conversation beyond the scope of today's discussion. But I would always insist that let people get the old apprenticeship model, which is what internship is all about. I think it's a powerful way of immersing them, but that immersion has to be followed by guided reflection, which is where wonderful faculty like you would play a huge part. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. If possible, I can connect with you after the session through LinkedIn or something.
Well, we are all in the same profession. We are all corporate teachers, isn't it? So obviously we can stay connected. I think.
Thank you so much.
One of the benefits of Bombay Management Association is we are all fellow travelers in the same journey. So I'll be more than happy to support you in any way I can.
Thank you.
I will request our past president, Shri Indrapal ji, to unmute himself.
Yeah, I did that. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Really enjoyed your presentation, Mr. Jayshankar. Hello.
Thank you, Indrapal ji. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just have in front of me Dr. Sheth's book, The Self-Destructive Habits of Good Companies.
Yeah.
And Dr. Sheth is in a way my hero as far as, many things are concerned. I learned many things from him over the years. The first presentation I attended was in 1982. And guess who was my neighbor in that presentation? Mr. Azim Premji.
Well.
So that speaks for Mr. Azim Premji, not for me so much. But, that's sort of the enlightened businessmen, see how keen they were to learn. And I had made a remark that that time Professor Sheth was a distinguished professor of marketing at one of the University of Northern California or California somewhere. So I said, isn't he wonderful? So Mr. Premji's remark was that it is for nothing that he's called a distinguished professor.
True.
So I'm saying that the points you made are absolutely relevant. Family businesses, sometimes they create wealth and they feel they don't have to learn, and therefore they get stagnated and many problems ensue. But if you are truly person of caliber like Mr. Premji and so many others are there in India, then this kind of humility is required to go to a class and attend and learn and be current and so on and so forth, and then do what he has done over the years. The big the tallest philanthropist and so on and so forth.
Yes.
So I suppose this whole process of creating value-based businesses, which professionals like you can help, is a very important dimension. People do not realize that it's not only about making money, but creating something, a legacy that lasts and that does good to the society. And in that one slide, you had said that mostly making money comes first and nation building comes last. But if wherever you have seen people who are concerned more with making money, they have not lasted. But those who are worried about nation building, they've made money and they've created organizations that have lasted. I have worked all my life for Godrej, and I think we have done pretty good for ourselves in that sense. So I think it's wonderful that you have put together this book. I'm sure many would benefit by reading this and maybe connecting with you later on to get more insights. But these are the few things that comes to my
No,
mind.
thank you so much for your words, Nirpalji. But I can, you said 1982. It's such a long time back. So, I don't know because Dr. Jagdish Sheth has mentioned, I mean, you're aware, I'm sure that he was on Azim Premji's board for
Yes, yeah.
nearly 2 decades,
And Mr. Mariwala's board also.
Yes, so exactly. So these are people who have always gone around, talking to the wisest of minds. And I have, I've been fortunate to have. I treat Dr. Sheth not just as a friend but also a mentor, because we have collaborated on projects. But I've always been, and he's not just a marketing wizard or a strategy wizard. He's a universal, extremely wise man.
Extremely wise.
And then therefore, so last year when the government of India gave him a Padma Bhushan, I mean, it was very late in coming because he was such a brilliant man. Yeah. But what a
professor of his caliber should have been recognized much earlier. And by the way, I have his notes also of that program.
Of 1982.
List, yeah.
I must tell Jagdish that one of his old students, and he has a remarkable memory.
Yeah, sorry?
Sorry, I said he has a remarkable memory for names, dates. So if I mention it, I'm sure he'll say, yeah, I remember that,
When we honored him at BMA, I showed him that book. I mean, those course notes, cyclostyle and so on. And he insisted that we invite all the people who had participated. So we took care to invite all of them. Of course, some turned up, some didn't. But he was very happy to meet them. And some of them he had kept in touch over the years. I'm so happy that, this confluence of certain aligned thinking of Dr. Sheth's thinking, your life experience, and so on and so forth, have all come together to create something of greater value for the newer generations. And if they can...
we are all students, we have all learned from each. My clients have been my teachers. And then, of course, the privilege of working with, very seasoned professionals and professional managers and wonderful academicians,
Yeah. One other thing that, small thing I want to share is that in family-run businesses, if you really want to create professional early, then you have to give them responsibility. So at Godrej, what we used to do that after 2 or 3 years, we would put our people in our branches and make them assistant branch managers or branch manager, depending on the size of the branch. And over the years, when we have asked them that what were most defining experiences, they said that the years that we spent in a Rajkot branch or a Bhopal branch or a Guwahati branch or wherever it was, because that is how, like you mentioned, they really came to learn about our dealers, their association with the company, the customers, the government organization, filling of the tender, and you are on your own. There is no head office or the legal staff and others to back you up. You have to submit an offer, then you have to win the order, execute, and all that stuff. So people have said that those were our most defining years in our careers, when we were given independent charge of a small unit, and then we were reporting. In those days, there was no digital thing, so you had to send telegrams daily to how much you sold, how much cash you collected, and all. But those various disciplines, what they learned, they found that these were very, very valuable, and they missed those things.
Yeah, very, very true. And all that they needed, frankly, if I can just add to what you said, you're absolutely right. Immerse them and give them the autonomy, they'll do it. All that they need is a safety net, which is a good boss who says, Fikar mat kar, where you go wrong, we will guide you. That safety net gives people the confidence to say, we can try. That safety net comes in family businesses a lot. I praise family businesses because I believe that sometimes family businesses are far more tolerant than so-called professional organizations who are saying, target nahi hua, out. Here they understand it much more. Even during COVID period, of various people that I spoke to, it was my family business clients who I noticed were not, they were not the first to go and say, we'll remove, reduce salaries, I mean, they were all affected, but then they were supportive as, in a very large way. So that safety net, a good boss, a good family business can provide,
And that comes comes from certain value. We had Mr. Forbes talking to us at one of our meetings, and he kept on mentioning it for every decision. He said we kept on during the COVID times, how much support to give, whether to close the business or to create facilities or give transportation or whatever. So he said the key question that made us go forward was this one, that is this the right thing to do? So, look at the focus. I mean, how much will it cost us? Or, can we afford it, etc.? Or should we, this thing, instead is that the right thing to do?
Correct.
And he said, we asked that question at a thing. For example, they wanted to shut down the plant. So he said, will it be the right thing to do? Or they wanted to create facility for 40 of the COVID infected people to look after them and not send them home. And, that would cost lots of money to the company because they had to create on facilities and so on.
Yes,
but then they kept on asking this question, is that the right thing to
right
do?
thing to do.
Now, where does that value come into their system to ask that question, is it the right thing to do? Now, how many people ask this question in family businesses, is that the right thing to do? Because if that was the right thing to do, I mean, without mentioning Mr. Singhanias, let me say, if Gautamji had asked this question, is that the right thing to do? A lot of public embarrassment would have been saved.
Yeah, that is
So why this question does not occur? Why this question doesn't flash the mind? Is that the right thing to do?
Many of you here in this group would know there is a public face and there is a private face. And when you work very closely at very senior levels, you get to see both. And then if you have, if you are independent enough to speak up and remind them, look, that if this kind of, shall I say, these two faces are bound to get you into trouble sooner or later, It just doesn't work. And anyway, so
this deep interest in this asking question, and then I checked back that, right now, Mr. Naushad Forbes and his brother, they run the business.
Yes.
But then I spoke to some of their elder employees, and they also told me that their father had this question all the time. In meetings, he said, maybe I don't understand all the nitty-gritty that you're, but he said, is it the right thing to do? Please answer me that question. And if it is so, then he said, we will go ahead and do that. Now, that's a fantastic frame of reference which family business can use. And Forbes and Marshall are by all means a successful business. And both the sons are, as you know, they're from MIT and Stanford and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So if those people are so valued, Mr. Azim Premji is so much valued, then why do we hear all kind of jabelas and, kind of the bad name that they get and so on?
It takes all kinds to make the world, isn't it, Indrapalji?
Yeah, I suppose so.
It makes the world very interesting and gives many of us a chance to study all these interesting people, Thank you.
So, thank you for your presentation. Really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Indrapalji. Thank you for your constant support, guidance, and your presence in the webinar makes it more value addition. Thank you. So I'll request all the participants to keep the video on for some time so that we can have a picture for this particular webinar, and you can remember this looking at the smiling moments of Bombay Management Association. So I'll request the Secretariat to take the snaps.
Yeah, ma'am.
And request everyone to keep the video on for some time. Do join us on 8th of December, evening 6 o'clock for our series celebrating Indian managers who made a difference. And this time we have Mr. Sheikh, who will be presented as one of the celebrity Indian manager. Do have a look at it, all the previous episodes of celebrating Indian managers who have made a difference on the BMA YouTube channel. Please subscribe to Bombay Management Association's YouTube channel. Do join us on 8th December 2021 at 6 p.m. for another exciting episode of celebrating Indian managers who made a difference. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jayshankar ji, for that very enlightening session. And I'm sure with your 13 blind spots, we all are very eager to go through the book that you have mentioned. And also thank you very much for your kind support of getting it at 25% discount. Definitely we will be availing that. And thanks for coming. Hoping to see you sometime in our office also physically, where we can greet you at the Bombay Management Association's office. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kavita ji.
So
Thank
good
you.
evening all and have a nice time. Do join us on 8 for another interesting webinar and paying tribute to people who have really made Indian management a place where we all are learning. Thank you so much.
Thank
Do
you.
join us.
Thank you.
Good night. Have a nice time.